Hello, this is Hit Pause, a podcast made in San Francisco with more questions than answers. Hello, and welcome to Hit Pause, the last episode of this first season. Started as an experiment, a moment to reflect on the current events in the middle of a pandemic and fueled by a new form of media. It is a 12th episode that will be a little shorter this time as I'm wrapping up this first season and reflect on the format itself, thinking about what to do, where to go in the second season, and how to bring us together on the continuation of this voyage. As I was recording many of those episodes, I realized they're a mix of research, sharing lessons through my work experience, but also maybe more of a reverie and introspection of sorts about this world which is changing so fast. Maybe it was for a first season the introduction of my voice into this pandemonium of voices, but I reflect upon the fact that maybe making it more of a dialogue somehow will be a good thing. And so I've been toying with the idea of bringing in some interviewees and maybe alternate, maybe mix the format with some reflections in the first part of the episode, with a continuation with an interview. We'll see where it goes, but this is a live format which will evolve over time. So I am here wrapping up a first season where we looked at the history of media. We looked at the moments in our history as a humankind where we evolved from one medium to the other, and the disruptions that happen when you do so, how the human brain adapts to those new ways of communicating information, retaining it, processing it. What happens when you have a triple conjunction of a technology disruption in society, which brings an economic disruption, economic crisis, which will have an impact on people. And the last trend, which sometimes happens with a media disruption or a medium disruption in media, and the confluence that sometimes those three waves of change can spell with sometimes grave consequences. We looked at the medium itself of social media and how it shapes the content that we process, absorb, are exposed to constantly. We looked at the ways that the medium itself is a transmitter, and therefore during the phase of democratization of that medium, more and more characters end up using it. And even if the medium was designed by good-wishing people who initially thought that the internet would become a medium lifting all the boats of knowledge and the common good and the wisdom of humanity In fact, it just provided a acceleration, an amplification, echo chamber to all sorts of messages and, of course, emitters of messages, sometimes some of them being, of course, ill-wishing on society. We looked at what I call the boron rods of social media, those necessary filters, slow down mechanisms that are necessary to slow down the impact of negative messaging and the conundrum that our societies and democracies are facing today. How do you walk the line between freedom of speech in a democracy and censorship or filtering? What are the mechanisms that some of the larger social media companies are testing, to be very honest, and starting to realize they need to introduce, test, play with, to accompany that evolution of social media in our society. So we covered a lot of ground in this first season, and I hope you have enjoyed listening as much as I have enjoyed sharing those thoughts. But we wrapped up the episodes 10 and 11 with a little bit more of a personal introspection, because the uniqueness of the new medium that we are now facing with social media is that everybody is becoming a content creator, and therefore everybody has a relationship, maybe responsibility in this new world, both as a content producer, but mostly as a content forwarder, a content resharer, to coin a term maybe. And so what is our own intrinsic capability at filtering out the negative messages, at adding value to the messages that we forward? What is our ability to slow down, to find ourselves those moments of silence, to avoid being drowned by this ocean of messaging? And so, as we pivot towards the next season, I will clearly address the more psychological aspects of my own reveries and discoveries, pondering, thinking about the human psyche and how we human beings are actually functioning and are constructed. And so I will take you on a voyage going back to the time you were a baby and you had core needs. I think that understanding the core needs of a human being is essential for being human, precisely at a time when artificial intelligence is pretending to model everything and to replace a lot of what humans are doing or are about. So what are those core needs? We'll explore that. Need to be safe, need to be seen, need to belong, need to build a core ego and a foundation to a psychology. Then we'll explore mirrors and mirroring and how the construction of a psyche is shaped through conscious and subconscious observation and the mirroring of behaviors that we observe in nature. With mirroring comes the realization that we're not alone, and therefore that there is a separation, intrinsic separation between I and you, and therefore at the foundation of a human psyche is the concept of boundary. So we'll explore the concept of boundary and the difference between two people, between the I and the we, between the inside and the outside. We'll explore how that creation happens, sometimes consciously, but most often subconsciously, and therefore how we as human beings start packing things into what Carl Jung coined the shadow. What is in our shadow, what is in your shadow, what is in my shadow, and how the shadow as a concept can be used to really understand and drive much of what we do in a family, in an organization, in an enterprise, even in a society. We'll talk about containers. Again, that concept that is so important, because once you create a boundary, you can create a container. We'll talk about pockets of emotions, because those containers in our psyche are really containing emotions. We'll talk about projecting and what happens when those emotions, those thoughts, those images, those futures are projected upon others, upon a future, upon a dream. We'll talk about escaping the field of reality and developing blind spots and going into magical thinking. We'll talk about being stuck in loops of such magical thinking, in loops of those containers, without being able to go out, go beyond a particular state. And with all those concepts, we'll develop and discuss, maybe with some friends of mine, colleagues from the professional networks, to ponder, discuss about their views of the world, their experience of those fundamental concepts and structures of the human psyche. So it is a voyage which continues. In a little bit, I will modify the publishing date of this podcast from Monday evenings to Thursday evening, to maybe give everyone the chance to listen during the weekend. I will reach out to some of you for participating into our adventure, experiment, and reverie. So thank you for listening to this first season of Hit Pause. I may take a couple of weeks of hiatus as I prepare the next season and do some research, prepare, reflect, to help you deliver more questions for us to consider, reply to, and build together a dialogue as we consider what is going on in the world today. Thank you. It's time to hit pause. This podcast is a simple way of sharing my thoughts. It is a personal endeavor, nothing more. A way to connect. The views and opinions represented in this podcast are solely mine. There are in no way, nor should they be assumed to be shared, supported, endorsed by my employer, the sponsors of this show, Anchor.fm, where it is hosted, and all the distributors thereof. You may find more information, links, pictures, videos, documents, and more, which may have been referenced in this podcast on my website at www.uteza.com/podcast. There, it feels so much better after saying all of this. And so, it's time to part ways, at least for now. Until next time, time to say goodnight, time to hit pause.